Welcome to another deep dive.
Oh, this is going to be a good one.
Today, we're going deep into George Orwell's 1984. It's pretty intense, but I think it's a book that everyone should read, at least once.
Oh, absolutely. It's more relevant now than ever, I think.
Right. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, like what 1984 can teach us about our own world.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll be using excerpts from the book itself so we can really dig into the specifics.
Sounds good. I'm ready.
So to set the stage, imagine a society where Big Brother's always watching.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are policed, history is rewritten, and language itself is manipulated.
Like, literally, they change the meaning of words.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's wild. Okay, so right off the bat, we meet Winston Smith, our protagonist.
Right.
He's living in Victory Mansions.
Victory Mansions, which sounds a lot nicer than it actually is.
I was going to say, not exactly a luxury apartment, huh?
Oh, no. It's more like, think crumbling concrete, flickering lights, rations. Very strict rations.
And of course, the telescreens.
Right. Always watching you. In every room. No escape.
So in this environment, where even thinking the wrong thing can get you in trouble, Winston decides to start a diary.
Yeah, which is like the ultimate act of rebellion in this world.
Right, because it's a place where he can finally express his own thoughts.
His own unfiltered thoughts.
Yeah, his unfiltered thoughts, no Big Brother.
No Newspeak.
And he works, by the way, at the Ministry of Truth.
The Mystery of Truth.
Where his job is to rewrite history.
To fit the party's agenda, of course.
Yeah, so basically they make everything the party does look good no matter what.
Exactly. And they have these other ministries too, like the Ministry of Peace, which is actually in charge of war.
And the Ministry of Love, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
But it's also ironic, right? Like, the names of these ministries are the opposite of what they actually do.
Oh, absolutely. Orwell he's a master of satire. He's pointing out how language can be used to manipulate and deceive.
Like, you think you know what something means, and then, bam, they flip it on you.
Right. It makes you think, like, how is language being used in our own world to manipulate us?
Yeah. That's a good question. Then there's this concept of doublethink.
Doublethink. Oh, my favorite.
So it's this ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously.
Without even flinching. Like, you can believe a lie and know it's a lie at the same time.
I was like, how is that even possible?
Right. It's mind-boggling. But it's essential for the party's control because it eliminates critical thinking.
So if you can believe anything, you won't question anything.
Exactly. You just accept whatever the party tells you as truth.
That's scary. And now, okay, let's talk about the 2 minutes hate.
The 2 minutes hate. Oh, boy.
This daily ritual where everyone has to erupt in rage.
Directed at Emmanuel Goldstein, of course, the enemy of the people.
Right, the enemy of the people. So who is this Goldstein guy?
He's like a scapegoat. He's the embodiment of everything the party hates.
So they're using him to channel people's anger and frustration, right?
Exactly. It's a classic tactic of dictatorships. Find an enemy, make people hate them, and then you can control them more easily.
And it works, right? Like, even Winston, who we know is a rebel, he gets caught up in the frenzy.
Oh, yeah. There's this one scene where he describes how he feels this kind of like almost sexual attraction to Big Brother during the hate.
What?
Yeah, it's weird, but it shows how powerful the manipulation is. Like, even someone who hates the party can't help but be affected by the propaganda.
Okay, that's just messed up. And on top of all that, you have the constant surveillance.
The telescreens, the thought police.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Listening to your conversations.
Reading your expressions.
Analyzing your every move.
And then you have the Parsons children, who are basically little spies for the party.
Oh, the Parsons children, they're terrifying. They're like little robots programmed to report on their own parents.
Yeah, there's this one scene where they're playing this game and they accuse Winston of thought crime.
Yeah, it's chilling. It shows how the party has infiltrated even the most intimate spaces, how they're turning children against their own families.
It's like they're creating a society where you can't even trust your own family.
Exactly. Because the party wants to be the only source of loyalty, the only source of truth.
It's a world where you're constantly looking over your shoulder, wondering who you can trust.
And it makes you think, how much surveillance are we willing to accept in our own lives in the name of security?
That's a big question, and one that 1984 really forces us to confront.
Right, because the line between security and oppression can be very thin.
So, in the midst of all this darkness, we have O'Brien.
O'Brien.
He's a member of the inner party.
The elite of the elite.
And Winston's kind of obsessed with them.
Yeah, Winston thinks O'Brien might be a secret rebel. Like he sees something in O'Brien's eyes, a flicker of dissent.
Like a glimmer of hope.
Right, exactly. Like maybe, just maybe, he's not alone in his hatred of the party.
He even has this dream where he meets O'Brien in the place where there is no darkness.
Yeah, that's a powerful image.
It's like he's longing for connection, for someone to share his rebellion with.
And it raises the question, like, how far are we willing to go to find that connection, that validation? Especially when we're surrounded by so much darkness.
And speaking of rebellion, we have Julia.
Ah, Julia. She's a breath of fresh air in this oppressive world.
Right. She's a bit more, let's say, practical in her approach to rebellion.
Yeah, she's not as intellectual as Winston. She's more about, like, living in the moment, enjoying life despite the party's control.
She calls herself a rebel from the waist downwards, which I always found kind of funny.
Right. It's a great line. And it speaks to her kind of like instinctual rebellion. Like she's not trying to overthrow the party. She's just trying to carve out a little space for herself where she can be free.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And their relationship is such a contrast to the grim reality of Oceania, right?
Yeah, it's like this little bubble of joy and freedom in this otherwise very dark and oppressive world.
It makes you wonder if love can even exist in a place like that.
That's a good question. Like, can love survive in a world without trust, without privacy, without even the freedom to express your own thoughts?
Now, Winston also sees hope in the proles.
The proles, they're the working class. They make up the vast majority of the population.
Right. And they're not as controlled by the party as the outer party members like Winston.
Yeah, they don't have telescreens in their homes. They can talk more freely. They have their own culture, their own traditions.
So Winston thinks that if there's any chance of overthrowing the party, it has to come from the proles.
He believes that if there is hope, it lies in the proles. That's a famous line from the book.
But, he also has his doubts.
Oh, yeah. Because the proles are also kept ignorant. They're kept busy with their work and their little pleasures. They don't really have the knowledge or the organization to mount a serious challenge to the party.
Like when Winston tries to talk to that old man in the pub about life before the revolution, and the old man can barely remember anything.
Yeah, it's like the party has successfully erased their history.
It's like they don't even have a past to rebel against.
Exactly. It's one of the most effective ways to maintain control. Make people forget that there was ever a different way of life.
So in addition to the proles, Winston also pins his hopes on this mysterious organization called the Brotherhood.
The Brotherhood, led by Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people.
Right, the same Goldstein from the 2 Minutes Hate.
It's all connected.
So the Brotherhood is supposed to be this underground network of rebels who are working to overthrow the party.
And Winston gets his hands on a copy of Goldstein's book, which is like the Brotherhood's manifesto.
It lays out their ideology, their plans for rebellion.
But it's a dangerous book to have. Just possessing it is an act of thought crime.
And it's this book that really pushes Winston over the edge.
Yeah, it cements his commitment to rebellion. He's ready to risk everything to fight the party.
He even contacts O'Brien, believing him to be a member of the Brotherhood.
That's a big risk.
Huge risk.
Because if he's wrong, he's done for.
And as we know, it doesn't exactly go as planned.
No, it doesn't. That supposed sanctuary above Mr. Charrington's shop turns out to be anything but safe.
Right. The moment the thought police burst in and that picture of St. Clement's Church falls to reveal a hidden telescreen, you know it's all over for Winston and Julia.
It's one of the most chilling moments in the book.
Yeah, it's like all hope is lost.
Because it shows that there's no escape from the party's reach.
No escape.
It really shows you how even the most seemingly harmless, like Mr. Charrington, can be a part of this web of surveillance.
It's messed up.
Totally.
So they get captured.
Yeah.
And then...
Well, then it's off to the Ministry of Love.
The Ministry of Love, which...
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of love, right?
The exact opposite. It's where they break you.
They break you.
Yeah. They break your spirit. They make you betray everything you believe in.
How do they do that?
Through torture. Psychological manipulation. They basically reprogram you.
So it's not just physical torture.
Oh, no. It's way more insidious than that. They want to control your mind, your thoughts, your very being.
And O'Brien's the one who does this to Winston.
Yeah, O'Brien becomes this, twisted father figure to Winston. He tortures him, but he also tries to reason with him to convince him that the party's way is the only way.
So, he's trying to brainwash him.
Exactly. And it's effective because O'Brien is intelligent, he's charismatic, he makes the party's ideology sound almost plausible.
But it's all lies, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a twisted, warped version of reality. But that's the thing about totalitarian regimes. They create their own reality, and they force everyone to live in it.
And Winston, he actually starts to believe it.
He does. He has to, because the alternative is too painful.
A torture.
The torture, the isolation, the constant fear. They break him down until he's willing to accept anything just to make the pain stop.
And what about Room 101?
Ah, Room 101. That's where they take you to face your worst fear.
Winston's worst fear is rats, right?
Yeah. And they strap this cage full of rats to his face, and they're about to let them loose to devour him.
Oh, my God.
It's the ultimate form of torture. It's designed to break you completely.
And that's when he betrays Julia.
Yeah. He screams, "Do it to Julia, not me."
He'd rather see her torture than face his own fear.
That's the point. They've broken him so completely that he's willing to betray the one person he loves just to save himself.
So that's it. He's just like a broken man now.
He's a shell of his former self. He's been completely reintegrated into the party's ideology.
And he loves Big Brother.
He loves Big Brother. He accepts the party's lies as truth. He's become everything he once hated.
It's so tragic.
It is, but it's also a powerful warning. It shows what can happen when we allow fear and oppression to take root, when we stop questioning, when we stop fighting for what we believe in.
But what can we do? Like, how do we prevent something like this from happening in our own world?
I think the first step is awareness. We need to be aware of the ways in which power can be abused, how language can be used to manipulate, how fear can be used to control.
So, like, we need to be critical thinkers.
Exactly. We need to question everything. We need to be skeptical of those in power. We need to be willing to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's difficult.
And what about the proles? Do they have any role to play in resisting this kind of tyranny?
That's a good question. Orwell seems to suggest that they do, but that they need to wake up to become more conscious of their own power.
But how do they do that?
That's the challenge. It's about education, it's about organization, it's about finding ways to break through the propaganda and the apathy.
It's a lot to ask.
It is, but the stakes are high, because if we're not careful, we could end up sleepwalking into our own version of 1984.
I don't even want to think about that.
And that's why we need to keep talking about these issues, keep asking these questions, keep fighting for a better future.
And what about Newspeak?
Newspeak. That's the party's attempt to control language itself.
To limit what people can even think.
Exactly. They're shrinking the vocabulary, eliminating words that express dissent, rebellion, critical thought.
So if you don't have the words to express an idea, you can't even think it.
That's the idea. It's a way of controlling thought by controlling language.
It's pretty scary when you think about it.
It is. And it's not that far-fetched. We see examples of this kind of language manipulation all the time in our own world.
Like how?
Think about the way certain words are used to demonize groups of people or to justify violence. Think about the way certain ideas are silenced or marginalized.
So, like, we need to be careful about the words we use.
Absolutely. And we need to be aware of how language can be used to manipulate and control us.
We need to be critical consumers of information.
Exactly. We need to think for ourselves, and we need to use our words to challenge injustice and defend truth.
And what about the constant surveillance in 1984? Like, does that have any parallels to our own world?
Oh, absolutely. We live in a world where we're constantly being watched, tracked, monitored. Our phones, our computers, our social media, it's all collecting data on us.
And that data can be used to manipulate us.
Of course. It can be used to target us with ads, to shape our opinions, to predict our behavior.
So, like, we're all living in a panopticon.
In a way, yes. And the question is, how much of our privacy are we willing to sacrifice in the name of security or convenience?
It's a tough question.
It is. And it's one that we all need to be asking ourselves.
But even with all this surveillance, all this control, Winston and Julia, they still find a way to rebel.
They do. And their rebellion is all the more powerful because of the oppressive environment they live in.
Their affair is like this little act of defiance, a reclaiming of their humanity.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can still find ways to resist, to connect, to find joy.
But it's a fleeting joy.
Right. It is, because the party is always watching, always waiting to crush any sign of dissent.
And they do, eventually.
They do. They capture Winston and Julia, and they break them. They destroy their love, their hope, their very sense of self.
And that's what makes 1984 such a powerful warning.
It shows us what can happen when we allow ourselves to be controlled, when we surrender our freedom, when we stop fighting for what we believe in. It's a systematic dismantling of the self.
Brutal.
Oh, it's brutal, and it's calculated.
And it's all done in the name of love, the ministry of love.
Right, which is the ultimate perversion, I think. They take something as beautiful and powerful as love, and they twist it, they distort it, they turn it into a weapon.
Yeah, like when they force Winston to betray Julia.
That's the ultimate betrayal, isn't it? The one person you love, the one person you trust, and you're forced to turn against them just to survive.
It's heartbreaking.
It is, and it shows how far the party is willing to go to maintain control. They will destroy everything that makes you human, everything that gives you meaning, just to make you conform.
And they succeed, don't they? With Winston, I mean. At the end, he's a completely different person.
He is. He loves Big Brother. He accepts the party's lies as truth. He's become everything he once hated.
It's a chilling ending.
It is. But I think it's also a hopeful ending, in a way.
Hopeful. How?
Because it shows us the power of resistance. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, even when it seems like all hope is lost, the human spirit can still find a way to fight back.
But Winston doesn't fight back. He gives in.
He does. But his rebellion, his love for Julia, it planted a seed of doubt, a seed of resistance. And that seed will continue to grow even after Winston is gone.
So you're saying that even in a world as dark as 1984, there's still hope for change?
I think so. Because as long as there are people who are willing to question, to think for themselves, to fight for what they believe in, there's always hope.
It's a good thought.
It is, and it's a thought that we should all hold on to, especially in times like these.
When it feels like the world is becoming more and more like 1984.
Exactly. We need to be vigilant. We need to be aware of the dangers of totalitarianism, of unchecked power, of the erosion of our freedoms.
And we need to fight back.
Always. We need to fight for our right to think, to speak, to love, to be ourselves. Because that's what makes us human, and that's what makes life worth living.
Well, that's a powerful message to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of 1984. It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it.
It will.
And hopefully, it will inspire us all to be a little more aware, a little more critical, and a little more courageous in our own lives.
That's the hope.
Thanks for listening, everyone.